Guys, this video is brought to you by freedomraffle.org. They are giving away a brand new Tesla Model S Plaid. We love doing giveaways and we love it when you guys win these cars. So head to freedomraffle.org to support our Afghan allies and hopefully win a brand new Plaid. Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video. You join me and Max both virtually because this is the kickoff of our $25,000 EV series. So here's the deal. We've mentioned to you in a couple of videos that the cars that we're covering, of course, are incredible, but they're $100,000, $150,000 in some cases. And that's just not helpful to the majority of people out there that are buying an electric vehicle. So Max came to me with an idea and said, hey, why don't we do a inexpensive or at least mass market appeal used EV purchase? And Max, why did you select $25,000 as the cap?
Yeah, so the new tax regulations that are coming into effect in 2023, next year, that's coming up pretty soon, are going to basically give it credit for used EVs. So that's pretty new. That's kind of exciting for a lot of used EV buyers because it means that these vehicles, which have traditionally kept more of their value, are going to now, theoretically, you're going to get a cut, I think $4,000 or 30% of the vehicle price, whichever is less. But that applies only if the vehicle is $25,000 or cheaper.
Super, super cool. So basically, now you know what we're up to. We're going to run the intro slide, and then we're going to be talking about which cars we're going to be test driving, what sort of we're thinking initially before we start the test drive process. And then, of course, we really want your feedback as to which cars would you like to see us experience throughout this series. And at the end of it, we're buying a car and Max is going to live with it for at least 3 months to give us an ownership update of the unit that we select. So Max, you know me, I'm a huge car enthusiast. I want to talk about product. What is the vehicle or what are the vehicles that we're going to be test driving throughout this series?
So there's a few obvious candidates, and what we're looking at here really are kind of compliance cars from the last decade of EVs, because it turns out car makers have been making EVs for a while. They haven't necessarily been as exciting, of course, as the flock we've seen in the last year or two, but they're out there. And so we're talking about things like the Volkswagen e-Golf, in some cases, older models of the BMW i3. That has kind of gone up recently. So you're looking at the very earliest 2014 model years to get under that $25,000 price. You do also have cars like the Nissan Leaf, first generation. That second generation, the 2016 refresh, got a lot more expensive. And there's a few others too. There's some outliers. There's the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, which you can get really cheap. There's the Chevy Spark. There are some Bolts, but I think some of the older Chevrolet Bolts from 2017 or so can be had for that price.
Now, my impression of, I think we should just dive into the Bolt conversation to start because Bolts have been extremely utility focused, pretty good driving cars. I think one of the best for the money and ultimately have proven to be quite reliable, except for a few fiery situations, if we will. But I think the interesting thing with the Bolt would be there's a lot of them out there, which means a lot of people own them. There's a lot of knowledge on them. And GM is replacing all of the early battery packs, which just seems like for me, if we got one, we'd find a pre-replaced battery, run it for as long as possible before GM makes us put the new battery in there. What's your thought on that?
I don't know if it's gaming the system. It kind of is gaming the system, but for a good cause. I mean, you get a lot of battery life that way. The old batteries, aside from the fiery issues, weren't terrible performers. So I think something like that would be pretty practical. The Bolt was one of the first EVs at that price when it came out to really, have that 230 plus mile range. That was kind of unprecedented at the time. And that way, the Bolt, when what Chevy and GM have had to do with it kind of reminds me of the Fiat 500e, where I think the CEO of wasn't Stellantis then, but he was saying basically, I hope you don't buy this car because it's a loss later for us. It seems like the Bolt has kind of become not something Chevy wants to talk about nowadays, but the upside for customers in that used lower end market is that you can kind of make out with a deal because it's not it's not Ultium. It's not that fancy new stuff that GM wants you to look at right now.
I want to say a huge thank you to Sparrow World for sponsoring today's video. Hey, these guys are doing something pretty incredible. They are supporting our forgotten Afghan allies through this wonderful charity, which you can find on freedomraffle.org. All you have to do is purchase a $150 ticket and you're immediately entered to win a Tesla Model S Plaid. Guess what? Sparrow World already has the Plaid, so as soon as you win the raffle, it shouldn't take long for you to get the car. On top of that, you have the best chances ever that I've seen of winning one of these cars in the raffles that we've done here. And that's because Sparrow World has only sold about 20% of their tickets coming up to their deadline October 1st. So all you have to do is head to freedomraffle.org to support our forgotten Afghan allies by purchasing some tickets. And of course, you're entered to win that awesome Model S Plaid. Best of luck, and thank you to Sparrow Worldwide for sponsoring today's video. Yeah, and I mean, I think we've mentioned to a lot of people, just in conversation I've spoken to, and also we've dropped hints that this series is coming in other videos, and we keep getting the bolt, bolt, bolt comment, and it just seems to be the go-to response. But let me ask you some questions. You've done some research here. i3s don't seem to be too bad, but you can't really find the biggest battery i3 out there for that $25,000 price point. Is that correct?
That's correct. So they bumped up the i3 battery later in its run, but those newer models are just significantly more expensive. So we can actually get the 2014, 2015 models with the range extender, which is a cool upgrade. There are some caveats to that too, though, because they basically nerfed the range extender for the US market. So if we ended up going in the i3 direction, you might see in that series us kind of hacking the car to get it to the European spec where you can use the full range extender. There's some boring regulatory reasons why they nerfed it for us Americans, basically.
Right, and it was basically because it couldn't travel farther on a tank of fuel than it could on a charge of electricity to qualify for the tax credit. I've owned 3 i3s. We've done this hacking series a long time ago, back when Out of Spec was newer, on unlocking our range extender i3. We actually had it with active steering. We hacked it to do. We unlocked a whole bunch of stuff. It was really cool. And I think one of my favorite cars ever made is the i3. But again, our goal here isn't necessarily to choose the best car for our weird, quirky car needs. It's really to help as buyer advice to someone who is stretching into a car. They really want it to be electric, and what's the best bang for the buck. And so that's the point of this series is you're going to take this approach with a very, I would say, more sensible approach than I would when we come to this, which is why you're handling most of these videos. And what's your head leading towards right now? Because we'll talk about some of the other points of the series later on, but if you had to just choose right now before driving anything, where's your head at?
Well, if I had to choose just by the numbers, right, we had that Bolt conversation, probably Bolt in terms of the range, how long it's been around, how many of them are around, that whole recall program, which can kind of be a good thing for you as a consumer. But I think in terms of what I would like to drive and what might be the best driving car for most people, my guess would be e-Golf, because of course it's a Golf, right? It's a 7th generation MQB platform. Very venerable kind of spec of car that just happens to be electric. They didn't compromise it too much. They didn't make it too heavy. The downside of that is it doesn't have great range. I think it's 120 or so miles, but well-engineered car. It's a Volkswagen. So I think that would be, my guess is probably the best driving, most fun one as like a kind of short to medium distance car. I don't think it has any of the fancy DC fast charging, but it is a very usable car.
Right. So it does DC charge, but it's not actually a liquid cooled battery pack, is my understanding. So they tend to get really hot. So you get like 1 DC charge a day before it's just like, nope, I'm done.
It's the Leaf issue. And I haven't looked too much into degradation. Obviously, with the first gen Leafs, that was a huge issue. I don't know as much about the e-Golfs because generally it seems to be more of an underrated, or just they made fewer of them, I think, car for the US market compared to the Leaf. I mean, Leafs were so popular. They've been sold here for so long. There's just so many of them. I don't know too much personally about the degradation story with e-Golf. So that
Yeah,
would be
neither
interesting to
do
look
I.
into.
And same with original Hyundai Ioniq having an air-cooled system, or Soul EV air-cooled. These are all the cars that we're going to be looking at and doing a series over. Who knows how long this is going to take, but we really want to evaluate all options here.
Yeah,
And I think the topic of air-cooled versus liquid-cooled will become a huge conversation when we're reviewing these individual vehicles. Now,
absolutely. Yeah.
the thing is, this $4,000 tax credit that we're trying to stick this program into has a big caveat, which is it has to be purchased from a dealer. Is that correct, Max?
It is, and that's basically, you could say it's a bone to the dealers, but also it's probably a loophole blocker because it means people can't just pocket used EVs, sell them to each other, and get money from the government. So
Right, you
it's
sell it
essentially
to me, I sell it back to you. We just made eight
yeah,
grand.
you could see how that could be abused. So the idea is it has to be, yeah, it has to be at least 2 years old as well. That's another interesting requirement.
Ah.
That's not going to be an issue right now with the EV market, but that is something else to note. So at least 2 years old, sold through a dealer under $25,000.
Right. So we're really trying to find a car that fits within this window. I think we also want to learn how the tax credit is activated, used, how we claim it, things like this. So these are all the things we'll learn. But ultimately, I'm just so excited. What are we going to do with this car? So we're going out. I've given you basically a $25,000 hard cap budget on this. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to go out with an open checkbook, and we're going to go to the individual dealers, and we're going to film the test drives, and we're going to film actually the looking at experience, putting ourselves in the shoes of someone looking to buy one of these cars. So how the heck are we going to find these things out at dealers?
Well, we're going to have to basically look at all the online sources, look through your Auto Trader, your cars.com, Craigslist, services like Auto Tempest that kind of group that together. eBay too. I know that's how you found your Leaf, right? So like
Yep.
there's a lot of places to find used cars. Unfortunately, I think that is online. Doing research there is where you're going to have to go, because it's not like you're going to go to a dealer and they're going to be proudly, selling their used EV fleet to the degree that it exists. It's not something that, frankly, I don't think most dealers know much about. Like if you have a Kia dealer and they have a Soul EV, the odds of someone at that dealer knowing much about it, my guess is they'd be pretty low. But that's something we can see in the series, is how well versed are the dealers with their EVs that they may or may not know about, and how easy is it to buy them
Right.
from those dealers.
So the series is really going to be comprised of the research state, where you're going to be researching the car, going to find the right dealer to test drive the car. And then throughout your research, you're also going to share the known flaws, the known issues, for example, degradation on early Leafs, what to look out for, what not to. Potentially, we'll even find some things about dealers along the way. Hopefully, we find some amazing dealers. Hopefully, we find some terrible dealers, and we can really see what's out there in the market, because I think a lot of car review outlets certainly just stick to reviewing brand new cars. And certainly it's easy. They just show up at the office, 2 or 3 of them a week, and you can just make some videos about them and send them on their way. And that's the easy way of doing things. But it doesn't help the larger market out there, which is the used market. And again, every car is individual, and every car will have its own story, such as, paint damage or an accident history or something. But at the end of the day, we're really trying to figure out what are the overall pros and cons of each model when looking at used, and the price range that you can expect to pay for it in today's money. So, Max, when we select a car and we go and buy one, what's the plan after that? What are you going to do with it?
Well, I'm going to live with it for a few months. And after that, who knows what we'll do with it. But basically, it's going to be a very kind of real world experience of I'm just going to drive it to the extent that I can around town on any trips I do. And the idea there being just see what it's like to own. Interestingly enough, I think this timing is going to intersect with winter in Colorado. So it's going to be very real world in that sense, too, of how does whichever EV we end up settling on fare in winter. With the a lot of that's tire dependent, but also, of course, the motor configuration. Some EVs handle that better than others. Colorado is a very interesting state to test this stuff in. So basically, I'm going to be putting it through the ringer as a daily car for a few months.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to see what we choose. Of course, my heart says, let's get a BMW i3 again, but I've already done that 3 times. Maybe we'll end up there. Maybe we won't. I think ultimately, probably not. But yeah, the e-golf thing seems to be really interesting to me. The Bolt just seems like right off the bat to be just the answer right there. But of course, I know there's a lot of Leaf money out there. Leaf might be a really good range for dollar compromise if we can find a newer one, especially. We're just going to have to go through and look at the whole market. So here's what you can expect from us over the coming months on this. In this video, comment with the cars you think we should review. Should we even be looking into newer vehicles such as Archimoto FUV or some of these new, less expensive electrified transportation devices? Of course, that wouldn't qualify for the use tax credit, but it would fit in with the pricing category that we're looking at. And then, basically let us know what you want us to look at. And then you're going to see us test driving the cars, going through everything, a full ownership report from Max, and then we'll decide what to do at the end, whether it's something we want to keep or sell off or do something cool with. We'll have to see. But ultimately, I just bought the cheapest electric car for sale in the country, the Leaf. It was $3,750. I couldn't be more pleased with it. It's got over 50 miles of range, racing red, heated seats, heated steering wheel. Everything works. Truly a wonderful machine, except for the AC charging. That's a whole nother topic, but at least it DC charges. And, I think that's a compromise vehicle for many, but there's a lot of cars that you can get for this, let's just say $10,000 to $25,000 range that we'll primarily be dabbling in. So any last comments or thoughts, Max, as to what you're looking forward to seeing out of this series?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing which car it is, and I do want to hear from you guys about like, are we wildly off base with some of these picks here? Is there a wild card we're not talking a lot about, like the Soul EV or maybe the Ionic Electric? I don't know. Let us know if you have an idea or if there's something that you've been wanting to see, because that's kind of why we're putting this out here. We're announcing it. It's going to be a process, but I'm looking forward to seeing what we pick.
Yeah, can't wait as well. Thank you all for tuning into another Out of Spec Reviews video. Really can't wait to see what we end up purchasing and how it all goes, because there's a lot of cars out there, but there's also not a lot of cars out there, depending on which way you're coming from it. You're not looking at, well, maybe we are looking at used Model S money for a really cheap old Model S. You think you can find a ratty Model S down that low?
Maybe, and that might be a whole series of making it drivable, or what, I don't know what condition it would be in. A few years ago, that wasn't an uncommon thing. Nowadays, I don't know, but definitely something I want to look into, because obviously, early Model S's is still a Model S. That's a pretty high-end car. So that's always been the benefit of used cars, that you can realize this huge depreciation. The unfortunate reality with the EV market is there just hasn't been that many luxury EVs until relatively recently, and the ones that have existed have not depreciated that much. So it hasn't been too much of a factor yet, but those Model S's are getting old, right? Some of those are a decade old now. So definitely something I want to look into.
Yeah, and a lot of them have free unlimited supercharging for the life of the vehicle, which would factor into cost massively if someone's stretching into one of these. On the flip side, a lot of them are out of warranty, which would also factor into cost. So these are all the conversations we are going to have coming up. Can't thank you all enough for watching, and we'll see you on another one soon. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.